Welcome back. We're tracking the rollout of the vaccine, the dry runs that we are starting to see for once we've got the approvals coming in for emergency use of 2 vaccines here in India. Professor Raghavan also joining us now, Principal Scientific Advisor, Government of India. Professor, great to have you with us. I wanted to get some insight from you as well in terms of the logistics of the rollout, the kind of feedback that you're seeing post the dry runs that have been conducted on ground and already at quite a large scale.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. The logistics of the rollout have been put in place by the committee called the NEGVAC, the National Expert Group on Vaccination, and that whole plan has been detailed out. That committee is chaired by Dr. Vinod Paul and Mr. Rajesh Bhushan, the Health Secretary. And the Health Ministry has now implemented the plan in the greatest detail, right from identifying components at the manufacturing site to stockpiling, fill and finish, distribution, and actual vaccination. These are the components which have also been tested out in the dry run, which have taken a few states a few days ago, and again, yesterday and day before in other locations. So there's full preparedness in place.
Fantastic. Any challenges that came up, Professor, that needed to be dealt with in terms of the intricacies of administering this? Any concerns, or was it all smooth sailing?
India has had a lot of experience in vaccination, in childhood and maternal vaccination. And this, of course, is at a much larger scale. So with that experience and the experience of organizing other large-scale, programs such as our general elections, everything was carefully planned. And the dry runs would have checked any potential areas which need particular attention. Nothing significant has come out.
Professor, good morning. Nikunj Dalmia also joining in. I'm asking very basic questions because the general mood is 80% of Indians are happy, but 20% Indians are worried about side effects. The minute they think of vaccines, the first thing which comes to them is side effects. And the other concern is, since there is very limited data available, how can one be very sure of side effects?
2 different points. One, vaccines are given to healthy people, and therefore the safety studies are very, very rigorously done, because unlike someone who's very badly ill, where the risks may be there, but the benefits are very high, and therefore you can give a drug or a vaccine to them, which has side effects. You can't do that for normal people, where they're otherwise healthy. So the safety standards are very, very high for vaccines. And the side effects, if any, are usually very minor, aches and pains and so on and so forth. So that's the usual practice. In some very rare cases, there might be conditions where people have to be careful. And the vaccination program is geared to identify such situations and not let that happen. So I don't think you need to worry about side effects. People take many kinds of medications which have, much higher side effects. And the value which vaccination brings is so high that, and the care which has been taken in, developing vaccines so high that people have no cause for worry.
What about precondition or medical morbidities, at least for senior citizen group, diabetes, blood pressure? Do they need to be screened differently? Will there be a different protocol for them?
Protocols are simply in addition that, they will have to declare these conditions and people will watch out while giving the vaccination. The vaccine should be perfectly fine for people with those kinds of comorbidities. There may be someone who have immunological disorders, immune compromised people, and for them the situation would be different. But those are very, very few, and they can be identified.
There's a whole concept of antibodies, which in a sense people who've suffered with corona, they currently have. If you have corona or COVID-19, you get antibodies. But there is perhaps very little data available that are these antibodies permanent or are they temporary? Similarly, after the vaccination, can we be reasonably sure that antibodies are permanent or they need to be monitored regularly?
As you know, this is a pandemic which started last year early, and the answers to both the questions, how long does protection from infection last and how long does protection after vaccination last, will be known only with time. We do know about protection after infection, that it lasts at least 6 months, at least, and could be longer. How much longer, we don't know yet. Similarly, about vaccination, we do know from the results of clinical trials that vaccination will protect. How long will that last, we don't know. Typically, it will last again, at least a year is the expectation. But there are many, many illnesses where vaccination is done regularly. And once a population has been vaccinated substantially, incremental vaccination is a process which can be readily done.
Just one more question. We know that the virus has started mutating, and virus is something which can mutate, and that's what history tells us. What are the chances that the virus may actually mutate and the vaccine rollout which is actually happening may not impact the mutated virus?
There have been many mutations in this virus as it is traversed across the globe, and most of them are not relevant to the transmission or infection of the virus, and they're just markers in time and space about the changes which have taken place. There have been a few other variants which are of importance. One is the variant in Kent near London, and that is important because that has clearly increasing evidence has shown that it's increased transmission, though not severity of the disease. And similarly, one in South Africa. There has been another variant which has come in a Danish mink farm, which has somewhat decreased the immune response after infection. That didn't get out into humans, fortunately. Now, what these means is that when there's increased transmission, for example, that if this grows in the population as it is, then it will infect a far larger number of people, and therefore vaccination programs have to be ramped up. This particular strain is not vaccine recalcitrant. Vaccines are effective against this. In theory, it's possible for mutations to accumulate, which also make vaccines less effective or ineffective. That can be determined only by large-scale sequencing efforts of the virus, checking along with that whether they are immunologically, the immune system can be less effective against it or not, and then deciding what kinds of vaccines to make or what other kinds of vaccines can be used which could be effective against them. So these are the kinds of steps in the process.
Sure. Mr. VijayRaghavan, thank you so much for taking the time out and so patiently taking up all our questions and answering them. Good to have you on the show, sir.
Thank you very much.